A single drone costs $500, just destroyed a $2 million armored vehicle. That's not a hypothetical, that's a Tuesday in modern warfare. And the billion-dollar defense companies? They are completely unprepared for what's happening right now. Here's the open loop you need to stay for. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why the most powerful militaries on Earth are hemorrhaging money, and why a kid with a commercial drone and a grenade is exposing the biggest financial scam in military history. Let's get into it. For decades, the defense industry ran a perfect racket. Governments paid, contractors built, everyone got rich. The United States alone spends over $900 billion per year on defense. $900 billion. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. And what did that money buy? Aircraft carriers worth $13 billion each. F-35 fighter jets at over $100 million per unit. Missile defense systems running into the hundreds of billions over their lifetimes. The logic was simple. If you outspend your enemy, you win. Bigger, faster, more expensive equals more powerful. That was the formula. That was the whole game. Then Ukraine blew that formula apart. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, it rolled in with one of the most expensive land armies ever assembled. Tanks worth $4 million each. Artillery systems costing millions more. A military budget that had absorbed over $600 billion over the previous decade. Ukraine had almost none of that. What Ukraine had was ingenuity, desperation, and access to commercial drones. Specifically, DJI Mavic quadcopters, the kind you can buy on Amazon for under $1,000. Ukrainian soldiers started strapping small grenades and mortar rounds to these hobby drones, flying them directly into the hatches of Russian tanks, and destroying $4 million machines with a $400 device. Let that cost ratio sink in, 1 to 10,000. For every dollar Ukraine spent on that attack, Russia lost $10,000 worth of equipment. That is not a military statistic. That is a financial catastrophe happening in real time. Now Russia adapted. They started using electronic jamming systems to knock drones out of the sky, but jamming systems cost money too. A single Russian Krasuka electronic warfare system runs approximately $15 million, and Ukraine just built better drones. Fiber optic guided ones that cannot be jammed at all because they don't use radio signals. They run on a literal wire. The cost of that upgrade? A few $100s more per drone. This is the economic doom loop that legacy defense contractors never built a business model around. Every time the expensive side spends millions to counter a cheap threat, the cheap side spends hundreds to evolve past the counter. Rinse, repeat. The math always crushes the expensive side. And this is not just Ukraine. Look at Yemen. The Houthis, a rebel group with no conventional air force, started launching cheap Iranian-supplied drones and missiles at Saudi oil facilities and commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Some of these drones cost as little as $2,000 to produce. The Saudi response? Patriot missile interceptors. Each one costs around $4 million to fire. $4 million to shoot down a $2,000 drone. The Houthis launched dozens, sometimes hundreds. You do not need a spreadsheet to see how that math ends. Global shipping companies started rerouting away from the Red Sea, adding up to 14 days to voyage times and costing the global shipping industry an estimated $1 billion per week in additional expenses. Ports in Europe and Asia felt it. Consumer prices shifted, all because a militia with a budget smaller than a mid-size American car dealership decided to weaponize cheap drones. One shipping disruption, billions of dollars of global economic damage, no fighter jets required. Meanwhile, back in the boardrooms of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing, something uncomfortable is happening. Their stock prices surged early in the Ukraine conflict as governments scrambled to restock depleted arsenals. Raytheon, now RTX Corporation, saw enormous demand for its Stinger missiles and Patriot systems. Great for the quarterly earnings call. But the deeper problem is growing. These companies are built to sell expensive, complex systems with decade-long procurement cycles. They are not built to iterate fast and cheap. Their entire business model depends on scarcity and complexity. A drone startup in a garage in Austin, Texas, can prototype, test, and deploy a new attack drone in 6 months. Raytheon's procurement cycle for a new weapon system averages 17 years. 17 years. From contract to battlefield. The Pentagon is starting to notice. The U.S. Department of Defense launched its Replicator initiative, designed to field thousands of autonomous drones quickly and cheaply. The goal? Counter China's own massive drone build-out, especially around Taiwan. But here's the uncomfortable truth behind the initiative. Even the American military's cheap drones aren't that cheap when run through the traditional defense procurement machine. Red tape, compliance costs, and contractor margins inflate the price of a drone that should cost $2,000 into one that costs $40,000 by the time it reaches the battlefield. China, by the way, is playing this game better than anyone. DJI, the company whose drones ended up in Ukrainian hands and Russian hands, is Chinese. The Chinese government has quietly built the world's dominant commercial drone manufacturing base. They control somewhere between 70 and 90% of the global consumer drone market. That's not an accident. That's industrial strategy. While American defense contractors were lobbying Congress for another billion-dollar contract extension, China was scaling drone production so efficiently that military-grade capability is now embedded in a commercial supply chain that the entire world depends on. The US has now banned DJI drones from government use. But the infrastructure, the manufacturing dominance, the intellectual property, that's already in Chinese hands. The financial weapon was built quietly, in a factory, over 20 years. So what does this all mean for the future of defense spending? The armies that figure this out fastest will win, not just militarily, but economically. Because the new arms race isn't about who can build the most expensive weapon. It's about who can build the most weapons, the cheapest, the fastest. Ukraine's drone corps, now formalized as a branch of its military, is producing tens of thousands of first-person view attack drones per month, at a cost of around $200 to $400 each. That's a monthly expenditure of somewhere between $4 million and $16 million for a weapons capability that can strike targets dozens of miles away. Contrast that with a single American cruise missile at over $1 million per shot. You can see why military economists are losing sleep. The billion-dollar armies aren't disappearing overnight. Aircraft carriers still project power. Stealth jets still matter for air superiority. But the economics of ground warfare, coastal defense, and asymmetric conflict have been permanently broken. The next war will not be won by the country with the most aircraft carriers. It will be won by the country that can manufacture 100,000 cheap drones faster than the other side can shoot them down. And here's the question that should keep defense ministers, CEOs, and investors up at night. If a $500 drone can destroy a $2 million tank, and history is already proving it can, is the entire $1 trillion global defense industry built on a business model that is now obsolete? Drop your answer in the comments. Are cheap drones the end of conventional military power as we know it? Or will the old money defense giants find a way to adapt and reclaim control?